A hurricane should hit the state of Florida by midweek. Good evening, I'm Mike Naso with this Saturday night update on the tropics. We have a brand new tropical depression, Tropical Depression 10, sitting right along and off the coast of the northeastern Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, forecast to gradually move to the north and then northeast towards the west coast of Florida or the Big Bend or the Panhandle, and strengthen into a hurricane before landfall. We're going to talk about this. We do have a hurricane out there as well, Hurricane Franklin strengthening. This is north of the Turks and Caicos Islands. It should eventually turn out to sea somewhere between Cape Hatteras and Bermuda, but if you're in Bermuda, watch it. It looks like Franklin will become a major hurricane, a Category 3, and that would be the first major hurricane of the season. We have this area of disturbed weather we've been watching in the Atlantic we're going to keep an eye on, and a wave here in the central Atlantic that nobody's really watching except I think it's curious as that moves towards the west, as well as stuff over Africa. We're going to talk about all this. Here's the latest on Tropical Depression 10. As of 4 p.m. Central Time, it was at 21.1 north, 86.1 west, winds of 30. The motion stationary, and it should kind of remain stationary until Monday, really, and then start to finally move, and then by Tuesday become a hurricane and make landfall somewhere here between Panama City and Sarasota. That's the cone of uncertainty right now. However, if you're on the right side here, if you're down in southwest Florida, I would keep an eye on it as well, because sometimes systems like to breeze a little further to the right and head towards that area of the state. However, if you're also on the North Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, not so much Texas, you'll want to watch it as well. Again, right now we do have tropical storm watches in effect for areas there of western Cuba, including the Isle of Youth, and we have a tropical storm warning for the northeastern coast of the Yucatan, because as the wind field expands, tropical storm winds may clip that area, even if the center of the system remains over the open waters there of the Yucatan Channel. Here's the visible satellite imagery as the sun starts to go down, and the center, it's stationary, so it does look, if I speed this up, let me see if I can make it go fast. Oh, that's too fast, good God. Here we go. If you watch that, there does seem to be almost no motion in any direction. If anything, almost a drift to the west or the south a little. It should do that for the next few days and then kind of loop back north. And that's why we have those tropical storm advisories for the Yucatan Peninsula. Again, it does look like it's going to continue to get a little bit of wind shear, but over time, the conditions won't be too unfavorable as it slides along a ridge to its east. There's the infrared satellite. A lot of heavy rainfall here in the Caribbean, so Cuba, watch out for the threat of rain and flooding. The Cayman Islands here, Grand Cayman, getting in on some of the action. And again, the Yucatan, there's moisture over that as well, and it's a very low, flat, wet, moist tropical environment there, so that won't interact too much with it, especially being in the formative stage. As long as the center stays over water, it can develop slowly, but, steadily. Now, the computer models bring this up to the north and then the northeast along that ridging, but let me warn you, we have a lot of recon aircraft flying into the system tomorrow. They're going to be zigzagging, they're going to be taking measurements, and they're going to pump that data into the models. And so by the time, say, 24 hours from now, when we have another run of computer models, we'll know for sure what we're dealing with. So these may change through time. Right now, anywhere from the Panhandle of Florida down south seems most likely, which is why the Hurricane Center is taking it into the Big Bend area of Florida. But again, that's just too early to say where exactly we'll pinpoint a landfall, but we will have a landfall. The key messages as of 4 p.m. Central from the National Hurricane Center: heavy rainfall, like I said, the Yucatan and western Cuba, that could cause flash and urban flooding, landslides. Is forecast to become a tropical storm Sunday, and you could have tropical storm conditions in those areas with the watches and warnings. Secondly, the forecast for the depression is to strengthen, and it could become a hurricane over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, bringing a potential of dangerous storm surge, heavy rain, and strong winds to portions of the west coast of Florida and the Florida Panhandle by the middle of next week. Not to mention, heavy rainfall is likely to spread into the southeast U.S., and it is too early to specify the exact locations and magnitudes of these impacts, but residents in the area should monitor updates and have their hurricane plan in place. This is the 5-day rain outlook. Look at this stretch of rain. It's going to be a very wet time from Florida through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, the entire southeastern U.S. You guys are going to get in on some heavy tropical rains, and it doesn't have to be a strong system to be a very heavy rainfall producer. I remember back in the summer of 2001, Tropical Storm Allison, 60 miles an hour, barely a tropical storm, came into Texas, and it flooded, and then it took a track all the way up the eastern seaboard, bringing heavy rains all the way throughout. So again, this system, as it strengthens, should be a hurricane of a Category 1 strength, is what we think right now. But regardless, rainfall. Hurricane Franklin as of 5 p.m. Franklin's a hurricane. It went over Hispaniola. It's been milling around. It should eventually make that turn like we set out to see, but not before becoming a major hurricane by Monday of at least Category 3 intensity, 120, 125 miles an hour. It's moving north-northwest at 8 with winds of 85. It's a mid-range to high-end Category 1 at 23.8 north, 67.5 west. Bermuda, you're not under any kind of watches and warnings yet. It looks like if it stays far enough to your west, it might not clip you with tropical storm or hurricane winds, but it might. You're not in the cone right now, but you're pretty close to the right edge of it, and so we're going to watch that. It looks like between Hatteras and Bermuda is where Franklin will turn out to sea, and we'll be dealing with Franklin turning out to sea as the hurricane comes into Florida. And by the way, if and when this system, this tropical depression gets a name, it will be another I-named storm like we've had a lot of the last several years. And the name is Idalia. And Idalia is the replacement name from Hurricane Irma in 2017, which was, of course, a Category 5, roared through the Virgin Islands, north of Puerto Rico, through a lot of the Bahamas, Cuba, the Florida Keys, Marco Island. It was a devastating, long-tracked, historic hurricane. Hopefully, if and when this becomes Idalia, it won't be like that. And it also won't be like Ian from last year, which was a Category 4 around Sanibel Island, Florida. But again, right now the forecast is a Category 1 somewhere in the Big Bend or the West Coast, so we're going to watch it as time goes on. Here's Hurricane Franklin closing off that eye there on the infrared satellite. So it's a little thing, little curly Q, a little curly fry out there, looking cute. Franklin looks cute, but it looks like Franklin's going to mill around and then eventually turn out, and we're not going to have to deal with it anymore. Here's the wind shear looking much more favorable. The blues and the darker colors are favorable, so Franklin's going to be in a good area, and our depression down here will have a pretty good environment as time goes on. We had our system in the Atlantic we're continuing to watch. If that steals a name as well, that would be Jose. So the next names are Idalia, Jose, and then Katia. And Katia was the replacement name from Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. We use these name lists every 6 years. So in 2011 and 2017, we had Hurricane Katia, but it wasn't anything too notable, so that's on this year's name list. So could we have Jose or Katia from any of these systems? Maybe. Look at this wave over Africa. This looks impressive. This looks like it's going to come off and be a hurricane, but who knows? Another wave behind it. So these waves are over Africa, and they move into the Atlantic, and we wait and see if they spin and become tropical cyclones. But as of now, the focus is going to be on our tropical... Ooh, what happened to the satellite there? Good grief. You see that? Creepy. Aliens. But anyway, aside from that, it looks like our tropical depression down here will be a hurricane along the west coast of Florida, and we have a hurricane here that should pass between Bermuda and North Carolina. We're going to talk about all these systems as time goes by. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on the tropics, and I'll talk to you next time.